Yeah. Coming to the reading we are going to discuss today, in this essay, he has addressed the poor and the poverty and how they function and benefit our society within sociological, economical, and political perspective. He has defined 13 positive functions of poverty to show how it is beneficial and useful to the social system. In these functions, most of the benefits are in the favor of affluent or the superior people rather than the poor ones. Herbert here has not intended to say that poverty should or poverty must exist, but as there are many dysfunctions than the functions of poverty. As he truly says, poverty survives in part because it is useful to the society or some of its parts. And as long as those parts enjoy the power, we should not expect very much to change. In the alternatives, he has described that many of the functions served by the poor could be replaced if poverty were eliminated, but almost always at higher cost to the others. Next.
So Gans mentioned several ways in which poverty is functional for the better of members of the society. So the first point he talks about is about the dirty work that gets done. So poverty means there'll be a lot of people to do low wage and the so-called undesirable work in a society where there are no population dependent on low wage, where everyone has equal opportunity for social and economic advancement, where there wasn't a great variation in formal education levels and job skills. I mean, who would do the dirty work? The second point he talks about is that that poor are required to work at low wages and they support a variety of economic activities that benefit the affluent. For example, the domestic subsidize the upper middle and upper classes, making the life for the employers easier. Basically, the domestic work gets done. This frees up wealthy for other pursuits like professional, cultural, fodder for people, magazine and stuff. In addition, poor also support innovation in medical practice as patients in teaching and research hospitals and as guinea pigs in medical experiments. Then he talks about professional and business niches that get created. So poverty creates the need for a number of professions, occupations that serve the poor. Pawn shops are in sense banks for those who couldn't qualify for loans. Other activities and groups that flourish because of the existence of poverty are stores in inner cities that often specialize in cheap liquor, cigarettes by the carton, the sale of heroin. Also, the presence of faith healers and peacetime army, which recruits its enlisted men mainly from among the poor. Then he talks about recycling contributions. So the poverty helps with the recycling of goods and incompetent professionals who are often buy goods that other people have discarded, including clothes, appliances, automobiles, etc. In addition to that, he also
Hello.
talks about the
Who's
yeah.
Aparna? Go little slow. You're going really fast, huh? Go little slow. Explain
Okay,
everything.
sorry, so sorry.
Explain everything slowly. No problem. We have
Should
time.
I start again? Should I just continue?
No, just continue from wherever you are, but just go a little slower. Hmm?
Okay. So Gans talks about recycling contributions. So basically, he tells that the poverty helps with the recycling of goods and incompetent professionals. Poor people often have to buy goods other people have discarded, including clothes, appliances, automobiles, etc. In addition, the poor may be forced to go to professionals that can't attract the wealthier clients. Bella, next slide. Hmm. Hello.
Yeah, is it there? It's there on my side.
No, it hasn't changed for me yet.
One
Has it
second.
changed for other people?
Yes, it has. Aparna, I can see the
Okay, then
search.
I'll
Yeah, it
okay,
starts with
then I'll
uphold
continue then.
conventional norms. Huh.
So a population of poor people helps in just give me 1 minute so I'll be able to see it in on my screen. Okay, yeah. So a population of poor people helps uphold conventional norms. The poor more often get caught in criminal activity, and most studies deal with or highlight crimes committed by the poor. To justify the desirability of hard work, thrift, and honesty, the defenders of these norms must be able to find people who can be accused of being lazy, spendthrift, and dishonest. Moreover, since the poor people lack political and cultural power to correct the stereotypes that other people hold of them, they are continue being thought as lazy, spendthrift, etc. Then Hans highlights and talks about cultural contributions. So what he talks about is the poor also serve as a direct cultural function. The culture is being created by or for them, and it is adapted by the more affluent. He talks about impoverished cultures that are produced culture by and it has been valued by the wealthy classes. Blues and jazz, for instance, or country western music all have their roots in black and rural heritage. The Beatles, they come from working class Liverpool. Modern variants of this are rap and hip hop.
The next point that he talks about is that the poor offer vicarious participation to rest of the population in uninhibited sexual, alcoholic, and narcotic behavior. So what he says that there is usually an opinion that being freed from the constraints of affluence, they are often thought to enjoy more than the middle class. Thus, many people, some social scientists, believe that the poor not only are more given to uninhibited behavior, which is actually not out of pleasure but due to despair. The next point that he talks about is they act as a measuring rod for status comparison. Poverty, he says that poverty helps to guarantee the status of those who are not poor. In every hierarchical society, someone has to be at the bottom, but in the American society, in which social mobility is an important goal for many, and people need to know where they stand, the poor function as a reliable and relatively permanent measuring rod for the status comparison. Next. Next, he talks about that the poor also aid the upward mobility of groups just above them in class hierarchy. So many Americans have entered the middle class through the profits earned from the provisions of the goods and services in the slums, including the illegal ones. So there are some benefits that are given to the poor people, and due to that, there are many people who have entered the middle class. The next one, he's saying that they help in keeping the aristocracy busy, wherein he says that society uses the poor as clients of settlement houses and beneficiaries of charity affairs. Indeed, the aristocracy must have the poor to demonstrate its superiority over other elites who devote themselves to earning money. The next point, he says that urban renewal projects lead to displacement of no other groups except the poor neighborhoods. So they are being powerless, they can be made to absorb the costs of change and growth that are in the society. In the final point, he says that the poor stabilize the political process. So, because they vote and participate in politics less than other groups, the political system is often free to ignore them. Moreover, he also says that since they can rarely support Republicans, they often provide the Democrats with a captive constituency.
So then he gave some alternatives, like the society's dirty work could be done without poverty, either by automation or by paying the workers who perform those dirty work with a decent wages. Also, the poor should not subsidize the many activities they support through their low wage jobs, but this would result in higher prices to the customers and their clients. The contribution of poor make the upward mobility of the group that provide them with goods and services could also be maintained without poor having such low income. Many of the professionals would flourish if poor become more affluent, and their role in the society could be eliminated, but the social workers could provide counseling to, like the professionals like social workers could also provide counseling to affluent as they prefer to do that anyway, and the police could devote themselves to traffic and organized crime. So these are some conclusions uh, from the text. So in the society, there would be a there should be a hierarchy, and someone has to be inferior to others. But uh, if someone is inferior, that doesn't in some attributes someone has to be inferior, but that doesn't need that someone will have to be poor. One could even conceive a society in which lower class receives 75% of median income rather than just of 15 to 15 to 40%. But if poor become more affluent, they would have access to enough capital, and they might take over the provider's role instead of consumer's role. Also, if the poor people become more rich, they would become politically more active, and it would be difficult to replace them. uh, it would be difficult to replace them, and so they would likely to resist the paying for growth and change and development in the society, and and this would result in urban renewal projects becoming more and more expensive. Many functions served by poor could be replaced if the poverty were eliminated, but it will be always a higher cost to the upper class people. Poverty exists not only because it has more positive functions, but also because the functional alternative would be quite dysfunctional to the affluent members in the society. So the poverty could be eliminated only when the functional alternatives becomes dysfunctional to the powerful people in the society, or the powerless can obtain enough power to change the society. Uh, yeah, we are done. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the presentation. So this was what the essay says, right? But it would be also nice to hear from you while you were reading this. Uh, how did you reflect on, your own social world, and what did this essay really help you think about, if it did at all?
Yeah, Sen, I would want to say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so reading this entire text, I would want to share an experience. So usually here, in my native village, I see this that there are these ration card bearers who get probably 35 kgs of rice, and they get it for free. And probably there are just two people in the house, and they get it. So what are they going to do of 35 kgs of rice? So what they do is they go out and they sell it at the price that the retailers are selling. So no, so what, in a way, what the writer is trying to say, that he's saying that poverty needs to be there so that the cycle keeps running. But like the example that I gave is like, yeah, somewhere they are benefited, but are they really getting those opportunities? I don't think so. I think still 17 to 22% of the population in India is under the poverty line. And just because they are given some benefits, we can't really say that, okay, poverty needs to be there. And what the major difference that I find in, he's talking about the American society and our society. When you talk about India, it is not actually, that only income is the reason that people are poor. So for example, there are out of the 17 to 20%, 22% people under the poverty line and that I'm talking about, 8.6% people are tribal people. So they live in areas which have which are ecologically flourished, so they don't need probably occupations. They live in those ecological areas, and all like whatever food or whatever they need is is what they get from the forest. They are affected when probably the forests are cut down or something. But yeah, that is one difference that I find in both, that there it is more of about economic, but here it is also that the poverty is some way not just economic but also to the ecological factor.
Okay, does anybody else wants to say something or respond to what Tejas just said? Or if any of the other people who did the presentation today, if you guys want to talk about your own reflections on the essay or what it helped you understand and so on, it'll be good to hear um, how this essay, what purpose or what function, to use the author's words, it served for you in order to understand what's going on.
Uh, Hello.
Yeah, go ahead. We can hear you, Shrusti.
Shruti. Okay. So basically I thought that he was talking about the American society, but if we look up like all over, so we can compare the same points all over the world, like anywhere if we can go we can compare these points. So it is not only to the American society but it is applicable everywhere. And thinking about poverty, we always have negative points that like it is not good or something, but it is only a positive perspective he's giving to us.
Uh, I wanted to I had something in mind. So
Avi, you are speaking? Who's speaking?
yeah, it's me.
Avi, okay, go ahead. Because your mic is showing mute still, but somehow magically we can hear you. Go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, my network is really shitty today.
Okay.
So basically, what I feel is that even if we try to eradicate poverty, or at least reduce it to whatever extent, um, a lot of the people who live who live in those conditions do not want to get out of those conditions. So basically you remove a slum and give them housing, like proper housing, and what they do is they put it up on rent. So they'll put it up on rent कि चलो भाड़ा आ जाएगा यहाँ से, and then so they'll go and live in slums again. So this is
So,
one thing that
so
happens in
does
India.
does this mean that they don't want to get out of poverty? If they're trying to make money out of this, I mean, do you still think that
I
they don't want to get out of poverty?
I think it is more about getting out of the way they used to live, or the way they live. They really
But that
I
is
mean,
not happening now because they are going back to slums, as you're saying.
exactly. So they probably don't want to get out of the way they're living in.
No, but you're saying two different things at the same time. You're saying they want to get out of living the way they do, and they don't want to get out of
Yeah, it's
the
kind
way
of
they live. So
controversial.
which one do you believe in?
It's kind of controversial.
It
It's
controversial. Nahi, there is a contradiction in your head.
Yeah, probably. I mean, I'm pretty confused between both of them. It's like they put their flats on rent, and then they go back to living again, like living in the slums again, and just like
Okay,
the
Avi. Okay, let me ask you this. All right.
okay.
How many people who you're talking about have you actually personally interacted with and try to understand why, if what you're saying is true, they do what they do?
I've met around five or six of them.
And
So, and yeah, they basically said that
did
uh
they have names?
huh?
Did they have names?
Yeah.
What were their names?
So one was named Rahul Shankar,
And
and
what was his story?
so he's basically a press wala, like a
Hmm.
dhobi ghat wala. He lives in Juhu Dhobi Ghat.
Okay.
So basically some years ago, he used to live someplace else earlier. I don't remember the place exactly. So those people said ki we are giving they wanted to remove the slums and give places on give them proper accommodation. So this guy, he put his house on rent, and he started living in this slum. And I asked him why. So he's like कि उधर से पैसा आ जाता है, इधर का पैसा आ जाता है, हमारा घर चल जाता है आराम से, and we don't have any problem living in this kind of an environment because we've always lived in this kind of an environment.
Okay. So what is your analysis of this, of what he told you?
So basically it's about their need of money.
Mhm.
and that they don't really have a problem with living in the way they do.
What makes you think that?
Basically, because it's either that they're accustomed to it already, like they've been living like that for so long, so they're already accustomed to living like that.
Okay, so now we have three hands raised. So I think I'll go in the order in which they're showing up on my screen. May not be the order in which they were raised. Shravan first, then Fleur, and then Tejas.
Okay, so I mean, I guess this whole idea, first of all, like just one statement offhand is that if there's a problem that they're just renting out these houses to get money, in fact, it's a government's issue then because they've given them a service which they're not interested in, and they are using that to get something which they actually need, which is the money. And cutting down the logistics and just adding more money to welfare would be a better idea than giving them a house when they have a house. Their immediate need is not a apartment house, but like maybe school fees or maybe new clothes or something like that. And then there's this idea of people judging the poor for basic lux. I'm not saying basic luxuries, but like not spending the money completely on utilities. Like when the whole lockdown happened and people were being paid for the poor were being given some kind of rations. I don't know how many of them actually got it. And then you'd see pictures of like, as soon as liquor store opened, there were these WhatsApp forwards going around like, "Arey, why are we giving them money? They're all going and lining up for alcohol." But I'm like, so do like no one is exempt from buying alcohol because of their class. Everyone gets drunk. You don't judge rich people for getting drunk. They could also use that money for an investment, buy a second house instead of buying like 25 bottles of Jack Daniels or whatever. But we judge the poor for it for some reason. I don't understand why. Like, and if poor people buying alcohol and not spending the money on utilities is an actual issue, what they need isn't some kind of. You don't cut down the money you're giving to them. In fact, you put them in a social program that actually helps them get over alcoholism if it's a genuine issue.
But Shravan's alcoholism is not a problem so much. Fleur,
No
do
one's
you?
alcoholism is a problem unless it's.
Fleur, you want to come in?
Yeah, but I was like replying to Avi when he said that I don't think that when he said that they didn't want to live in a high rise, it's just like a way for them to earn more money. I don't think they like living where there's no sanitation and there's like no proper drainage and stuff. But like in this way, if their life is better because they're getting more income, you can't just like see it as, oh, they're living in a better flat, so their life is probably better. But here they're probably getting much more income from the rent. So of course they want to get out of poverty. They don't want to live in that place, but that's just like beneficial to them at that point. So I don't know how anyone can say that they like living in the slum because they really don't. No one would want to.
Okay, thanks, Fleur. Aparna, you want to say something?
Yeah, I didn't want to comment, but what I want to say was this was very similar to a book that I had read, which was called Everybody Loves a Good Drought. I don't remember who wrote that book, but uh, yeah, oh yeah, he was a journalist. So
He
basically,
was,
in
he's very much alive and living and
yeah,
kicking,
he's a
huh?
journalist. Sorry.
Uh,
No, so I mean in this article he just presents points of functionality. He gives you an alternative ending. He just says that yeah, I presented points of functionality, but we can't remove the poverty because we need them. But I mean in that book he like after reading, and he just makes you question how much misery should the poor even endure. Basically, इतना देख लिया अभी और कितना देखेंगे वो. And after reading this article, I just had more questions. Like, I mean, we could make poverty less functional, but even with any change, there are winners and losers. So, who would be the losers in this case? And what's more interesting about this article is that it was written in 1971, but I don't think things have changed much between that time and here. Yeah.
okay, anybody else wants to say something? All right, so now this essay was very deliberately given to you because it is very easy to misread this essay. When you read this essay, superficially, it might seem that this guy is kind of endorsing poverty. Because he's talking about the functions of poverty and things like that. And then towards the end, he also says that, poverty is functional, and, it will create dysfunctions for some people if one has to remove poverty and so on. Actually, this is this essay is Herbert Gans. In fact, if you look at the rest of his work, he was a fierce advocate for the removal of poverty in much of his work, right? So you have to read this essay in the context of the rest of the work, because moreover, if you read the essay carefully, you also realize that it's not a kind of an endorsement of poverty. What he's trying to talk about is actually a debate within the discipline of sociology. So that's why it's sometimes it might be misleading to somebody who kind of isn't aware of the debates within sociology, right? So this framework. So if you read the first paragraph, he says up front that I am going to use a functionalist perspective to talk about poverty. Now, what is a functionalist perspective? All right. So functionalism in sociology comes from a very well-known sociologist named Emile Durkheim. Okay, so Durkheim was somebody who spoke about institutions in terms of their functions and dysfunctions, right? Social institutions in terms of their functions and dysfunctions. So, for instance, one thing that he pointed out was that there is, I mean, if you look at many of the main sociologists who are considered to be the people who contributed to the discipline, all of them were in a way born in the modern period. Say Marx, Durkheim, Weber, Mauss, and many others. So now, what they were really looking at is modern society and how it was different from the earlier form of society that existed. So, each of them looked at a different aspect. Now, Durkheim was looking more at the question of what he called mechanical solidarity and organic solidarity. So just what I'll explain this in a second. What he meant by mechanical solidarity is that when you have a society in which people are more or less the same, there are not too many differences within them. Each there is a certain kind of coherence in society or consensus which comes from that sameness. On the other hand, he says there are also societies where there is a lot of differentiation between people, and yet that differentiation also leads to a certain kind of coherence and consensus, and which has an interesting dimension to it. So, for example, he gives the example of a human body, and in the human body, for instance, you have different organs, and all of these organs have specialized functions, but the body works coherently as a whole, right? So that's why it's called organic solidarity. Which means that even though there is differentiation, division of labor, and different people play different roles and so on, together, in a way, society seems to work functionally or coherently. So, therefore, if you accept this view, then even things that in society you might seem to be dysfunctional can also be read as being functional. Okay, now something that has persisted in society for millennia is poverty. Okay, so then you can ask as a sociologist, why is it that poverty exists? Should it only be looked at as a dysfunction, or can it actually is its persistence actually a reflection of the function it serves in society? Now, obviously, if you read the conclusion paragraph of this essay, he is very clear in that he is not saying that poverty should continue to exist. In fact, he very strongly believes that it should disappear. But he's saying two very interesting and important things. He says that if poverty has to disappear, either the people who are not poor will have to make sacrifices. So there will be costs to them, to the better off in society. The elites, the wealthy, they will have to, in a way, sacrifice some of their privileges for society to disappear. Now, it's very difficult that they'll do that, and nobody will willingly do that. So the other approach, which generally tends to succeed a little more than the first, is that poverty must be shown to be dysfunctional to the elites. And if you see, for instance, the way in which reform in society has happened, like poverty alleviation programs, whether it's the welfare state and things like that, what generally tends to happen is that people manage to successfully show that the existence of inequality is in a way detrimental to everybody, not just the poor, but also to the wealthy. So, for example, you know that in 1868, 1896, there was a plague that struck the city of Mumbai, right? And a lot of people actually perished due to that plague. Thousands of people left the city and so on. Mostly the poor who had to flee the city in fear and panic. And the reason why the plague happened essentially was because in large parts of the city there was no kind of sanitation that was built into the city's structure. There was huge inequality in terms of access to services and so on. And this lack of sanitation created led to the disease. Right now, earlier before the plague, the elite of the city could simply say that the plague is something that affects the poor, so we don't care about it. But when the plague happened, the poor actually fled the city. And what that resulted in is, because the poor were also workers in the factories that were run by the elite, the businesses of the elite started suffering. And so for the first time, the elites in the city realized that they cannot ignore sanitation for the poor, because if they do at their own peril. And therefore, then the certain institutions like the Bombay Improvement Trust and so on were set up to improve sanitation conditions in the city and all of that. That was a case where the elites realized that poverty is dysfunctional to them. Okay, now the first thing that he talks about, where the elites make sacrifices, that is really rare, and unless there is a large revolution, that is not going to happen. So I don't think that the purpose of this essay is to argue that poverty is good and it should remain, but it is to argue that poverty has uses for the people who benefit from it, not the poor, the wealthy, right? And therefore, unless the wealthy have to forego some of their privileges and conveniences, poverty will not disappear. Or otherwise, the wealthy will have to realize that poverty is dysfunctional to them as well. Okay, so that is basically the argument of the essay. And towards the end, as he says in the last paragraph, that you will realize that the conclusions that I am reaching are the same as the conclusions reached by radical sociologists. Radical sociologists like, say, Marx, who said that one must overthrow systems of oppression and domination and so on. He's saying, yeah, I'm reaching the same conclusion, but through a different route. What I'm saying is, I'm showing through a functional analysis how poverty benefits the privileged, and that if it has to disappear, it will have to be at the cost of it will have to be borne by the privileged, right? That is basically the point of the essay. Okay, so yeah, now if anybody has anything to say, add, reflect on, or ask about this, we can discuss it. Otherwise, you can also take up some of the comments that the other people made and respond to those.
Yeah, in fact,
Yeah, who's saying something? Someone's saying something?
sorry. I think I was on mute. Yeah. Hussein,
Yeah.
Soham had a comment here. He says that most of the people are trapped in poverty because they don't have much of economical education. Like they don't know what to do with more money.
Well, that is really not true, actually. How many of you have had an education in economics? And I don't think, at least most of you, I think all of you, none of us are poor, really. It's not that you have to take courses in economics to understand or to overcome poverty. That's not the point. In fact, when you have less means, you tend to be more clever about how you're using those means, right? Which you see in a lot of people who have low incomes. right? So that's not really the reason why the poor are poor, because they don't know how to manage money. In fact, they do it much better than most of us, you know.
Yes.
So yeah.
In fact, most of us don't know what
But
to do with money, and but we are not poor. We're not trapped in poverty. We're still not trapped in
but
poverty like the way, huh?
our society still kind of has this idea that fiscal management is always something that it's only capable if you have a certain amount of money. Like for example, just buying quality products that actually last longer as opposed to things that will break down quickly. You need to have money to afford those. To buy in bulk because it's cheaper, you need to have money to afford that. Our idea of financial management is based on the idea of having money to use it well, not what do you say? Actually saving money, but just having money in the first place.
Yeah.
Like there was
Also,
this.
this also there was this point made about the poor wanting to live in poor conditions and so on, or liking to live, or not having an issue with living in poverty. Look, you have to understand that. I mean, I can understand that it's difficult for most of us to actually even imagine or conceive of how you have to run a house and put bread on the table when you have very low incomes. So I mean, it's obviously going to be difficult to imagine that situation. But if you one of the things that you have to understand is that nobody, I mean, often you will face this dilemma when you are thinking about the world around you, that you will tend to think that people are in certain situations because they are certain kinds of people. Okay. And the poor are poor because they are either lazy, or because they don't know how to manage money properly, or they like to be poor, or things like that. You often attribute certain kinds of behavior or certain kind of traits to people in order to justify their conditions. Hmm? Now, you must also realize there are two aspects to this. One is that it is often false, or most often false. The second is that it's also a reflection of your need or your ideology of wanting to rationalize something that is difficult for you to understand. Okay. For example, stereotypes. A lot of people have stereotypes about certain groups of people, whether I don't know, Muslims or Sardarjis or this, that, and the other, or women. Now, where do the stereotypes come from? Stereotypes actually come from a lack of understanding. That is the reason why I asked Avi immediately how many poor people he knows that he has spoken to, from where he's getting these extraordinary insights about their motivations. So we must be careful about attributing certain kinds of traits to people to justify why they are in the position or the situation that they are. You have to be able to look at the purpose of studying society in a systematic way, is to be able to understand the nature of the society itself that produces or reproduces certain kinds of conditions. Hmm? So when you so the question again about, do poor people like to live in poor conditions? Just ask yourself, would you like to live in poor conditions? Most people, especially when it comes to their basic human needs, things like food, shelter, clothing, things that are of the very basic material substances, or things that you need for living a decent, a dignified existence, are very similar. You will rarely find differences even across cultures. Okay, go and ask even a person from a remote community who has never lived in a city, would you like to live in poverty? They would say obviously not. Nobody does. It's people who are privileged who like to think that people like to live in poverty. Most people that way, when it comes to basic human needs, are very similar. Hmm? So what is happening is that when you have to make a choice between, all right, I have this much income, I don't know if it is enough for me to sustain my family, to meet for the food needs for the next 2 months. What if there is a medical emergency? What will I do if I need to send my children to school? What will I do if I need to get some of my children married, and so on? I have to start thinking about those things. And in the light of those things, I make a choice or a trade off, let's say, to, okay, not live so comfortably, but, take care of those things. Right, that is a trade off one makes. It's not an acceptance of poor living conditions. When you have to start making serious trade offs in your life, about very basic needs, that is what you call poverty. Okay, poverty is not the choice of whether I want to have red label today or I'll go for a beer. That is not, a trade off. That is a choice. A trade off is when you have to decide whether I'll save up for a medical emergency or whether I'll probably send my children to school. That is a trade off. Okay, or whether I'll fix this leaky roof, or whether I'll build a wall, which is right now kacha, and so on. So these trade-offs are what people are constantly subjected to, which is what we can understand as poverty, right? It's the diminution of life choices. Poverty is not only about an income. Of course, income is what leads to poverty, lack of it, of course, but it is the diminution of life choices and life chances. All right. Okay. I'll
Yeah,
stop talking now.
Hussein,
Please, others, go ahead.
Hussein, a comment I would like to give.
Yeah,
Like,
please.
even the early moderates gave this theory for British India, the rice bowl theory, wherein the people were more interested in a bowl of rice rather than democracy.
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, at some level, it's true. Everybody is going to worry about the bowl of rice. If I don't have any, if I'm sitting in front of a bowl of rice, then I can probably think about other things. Of course, for
Exactly.
any of my needs which are outside my basic human needs, all right, I need to ensure, for me to perform in those spheres, I need to ensure that my basic needs are fulfilled, right? I am not going to go and enjoy an opera if I have not eaten for 4 days. It's human nature. It's not about whether I am poor or I'm rich.
Yeah, in fact, a very similar argument was also placed for people who converted to another religion. No, that's why certain sections like Christians are called as rice bag converts, that they were bought over to another religion, uh, uh, just by giving them a bag of rice. Okay, and it's because that they were poor that they embraced another religion so easily, because they just needed food to sustain themselves. Sorry, basically what was actually being proposed is that that people can be bought over by giving them money or any other kind of item, just to ensure that they cross over to a different religion or something else. And just adding on to what Hussein also had to say about, in with respect to what Avi said, uh, I'm not adding anything more, very different either, but what I'm trying to also say is that we must also remember that there's nothing, like nothing wrong in what people do, like in the sense of, even if that person had to put uh, put his flat on rent and go back to slums, it doesn't mean that he prefers poverty. It just simply means that he wants to make more money. And I think you and I would not be very different if we had a similar situation or circumstance. Like, I would think of making more money. Even why not? If I had an extra flat to put on rent, I would. Okay, it doesn't mean that like I would prefer to be in poverty, and that is why I prefer the slum.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else wants to come in?
Uh, Jose, I would like to give an example, just a vague example. Like Osho became Osho when he has, like after he has satisfied his all his pleasures, as in he has 99 Rolls Royce. So after he became Osho after he is done with all his dreams. Right.
No, I don't, Nandika, I don't understand the point.
As in, so like we are thinking of poverty after, like, since we have a bowl of rice, we have satisfied our needs, we have our
Hmm.
stomach full, so then only
Hmm.
we can think of poverty. So like Osho, even he is a public speaker, so even he says that after I have all my needs. Like he has, he
Yeah, but
has.
nobody needs 99 Rolls Royces. Let
Yeah,
me tell
but
you that at least.
yeah.
I mean, at the most, I need one, and that too. I mean, a simple automobile will do. A Rolls Royce is a little, I mean, so. And more than an automobile, I would really prefer a good public transport system, because it's good for the environment. So look, the point is that don't make the question of basic needs relative. It's not. What I'm talking about is not relative desires of people, because there is no end to that. 99 Rolls Royces might not satisfy some oil sheikh in Dubai. That's not the point. The point is that what do you need for uh, basic for your body to function in a healthy manner, for you to be able to have a good quality education, to be able to be taken care of when you need health support, to be able to move around and access opportunities. Those are what we call basic needs. Okay, you don't need to live on in a mansion to do that. Hmm? And the problem in our society is that very few people, a small number of people, live in mansions. And in most cases, then you justified by saying that, oh, people who live in slum like to live there. That's not the point. The point is to understand the dysfunctions in society that create that, and also understand the reasons for those dysfunctions and the possible, like Herbert Gans is saying, the functions of those dysfunctions, right? Yeah. Anybody? Oh, Shravan has raised his hand for a very long time. Go ahead, Shravan.
So I don't know if this is me agreeing with the write up or not, because I was kind of confused by the ending. But I do think that there is a certain amount of like how much we uplift the poor. It's not like the rich are still going to go away. Like the extremely wealthy people still control like so much of the power in the world, and they have like with corporate lobbying, they can influence governments at this point. And we've seen what America does to any third world country that lets a slightly left-leaning leader at this point. Bolivia was a more recent example. So what exactly happens here? You know, like we can uplift the poor, but what do we do about the fact that there's still an like the fact that is the problem really that the poor exist, or that there are people rich enough to. I'm not saying this like uplifting the poor won't do anything unless like everyone is completely equal and no one really holds power over another person.
Okay, the
Am I
thing
making
is,
sense?
no, not at all. The problem is, no, okay, partially. So I think importantly, Shravan, one must be careful to not think about it as some kind of a poor upliftment program. Okay, nobody is trying to uplift the poor. You're trying to eliminate poverty, which is different. Hmm? Uplifting the poor is, philanthropic organizations do that, right? When we're talking about, and the point of this discussion also is not to make all of you be get into some kind of a mode of moral outrage about poverty. Of course, we ought to be moral outrage, but that is not something that can be taught, right? It is something that you and I have as human beings. The ability to have empathy and sympathy about the plight of others is empathy, and it doesn't only mean rich and poor. It means that if somebody hurts their hand, uh, I somehow have feel the pain as well, not really physically, but at least I can understand it. That kind of empathy exists in all of us, and you can, it happens to you even when you look at somebody you don't know, right? So there is a basic level of empathy that is very much a part of our nature. So the humanities class is not about teaching you to be moral beings. That's not the point. The point is to try to understand the nature of society in which you live, okay, and to also challenge some of the preconceptions that many of us acquire, mainly on account of our upbringing and our education, which are most often legitimations for the way the world is. Like for instance, these views that come in often, that oh, the poor are poor because they're lazy, they don't work hard enough, or they like to be like that. Those are that is what we call ideology. It's a way of trying to justify the world as it is, so that you can make sense of it in a way that doesn't force you to make any kind of sacrifices. Hmm? And I mean this not at a personal level, right? Also, you must remember that a lot of what we talk here is not at some kind of an individual level action. So I mean, nobody's saying that you must try to go and uplift the poor, so tomorrow you join some charity or something like that. Nothing like that. You can join a charity if you like, I don't care about it. But the point is that you have to try to understand that what you said about political power is very true. There are people in the world, the investors and lenders at the global corporate level. You have political power in our own society. You have the kind of, like for instance, just look at the recent farm laws. How many of you have been reading about it? Anyone has anything to say about it? Yeah, go ahead. Somebody's hand immediately popped up. Shravan, not you, somebody else.
Oh, I thought you were doing a head count, so I raised my hand because you
No.
asked how many people have read books.
Let's hear somebody talk about the farm laws for a change. Yeah, anyone?
Yeah, Hussein. Hi.
Hi, who's this? I can't see you on
Yeah,
the screen.
Chirag.
Chirag, bol.
Chirag. Yeah. So, like when we go through the laws and we read actual what it is written in the government's that book, so it states that it is beneficial to the farmers at some point, but it also has some सब उसमें कमियां भी है, तो वो सुधारनी भी पड़ेगी. बट यहाँ पे ऐसा हो गया कि गवर्नमेंट बोल रही है वो पूरा राइट है और जो फार्मर्स है उनका कहना है कि पूरे गलत है. सो दे कैन come together and solve this problem by listening to each other's problem, like what they are actually asking for and what government is actually giving. There's a kind of misunderstanding between both of them.
Okay. Anybody else? Anyone else? No one? That's it. Only Chirag has read a little bit about the farm laws. Nobody else has. Yeah, Fleur.
So now because of the new farm laws, maybe the farmers won't have a minimum sale price and corporates will come and exploit them because of the
minimum support price.
Yeah, minimum support price. Yeah.
What is that, Fleur? Can you explain?
A minimum price at which they have to sell their stock.
Exactly.
Now it's up for grabs. Yeah.
Yeah. What will happen if it is removed? That protection is removed?
Then then the corporates who are actually buying it from them, they obviously the farmers will want to sell their own stock, so they will. I mean, there'll be inflation. That around.
What will happen is there will be intense competition for buying those goods, and there will not be a floor below which somebody cannot sell their produce, right? So they will be subject to the competition, the market competition of the big companies who will be controlling the agricultural sector, and the prices may drop, and which might lead to a further depression of farm wages. Right. So that is the problem with the abolishing of the minimum support price, which these laws are trying to do. There are other things as well, but that's one of them, and that's one of the main contentions of the farmers, that the MSP not be removed. Okay. Now this is not a question of Chirag misunderstanding between farmers and the government. Okay, this is not a misunderstanding. It is a fundamental conflict of interest. Okay. Now you might ask, why does the government want to remove these farm laws? I mean, remove these protections for farmers. And this is where what Shravan said comes in, right? Because look, you have to understand that governments today, largely, in most parts of the world, not just in India, in most parts of the world, are elected by people, right? But the constituency, the people who they respond to, are the people who finance elections. Okay, there is a certain way in which the entire electoral system of what we call representative democracy works. If you want to run an election campaign, you need money. If you want to run ads in the newspaper, you need money. If you want to run field candidates, you need money. Election campaigning is very expensive business. Earlier, the election commission had strict regulations on how campaigns could be done, which means that if you take any contributions, those have to be, there is a maximum limit to how much you can take. The names of the people have to be evident and clear. The records have to be transparent and so on. All of those have been removed. Now, who funds political campaigns is completely opaque, which means that we are going more and more closer to the American system of elections, which where basically the elections are bought by companies. Literally, there is no difference between the Republican campaign and the Democratic campaign. In fact, there was one study which said that Obama predicted that Obama will win the election because he got more contributions during his campaign than the candidate who was running against him, right? So it's very much the same today in our situation as well. The whole this thing about electoral bonds, you must have heard of that, is basically that anybody now anywhere in the world can fund election campaigns in India, and you won't know where the money has come from. Now what that does is that the parties then, after they get elected, first of all, if they get good amount of funding, they get an advantage in the election, right? Because they can canvass better and so on. But once they get elected, then they have to respond to their to the people who funded them. Okay, which means that if Adani has, financed my campaign, I want to make sure that Adani is happy. Otherwise, next election, next round, I won't get the kind of support from him, right? Which means that Adani Agro businesses has to be taken care of. And what are the problems that Adani's agro business faces? It faces the problem of the minimum support price, which might potentially cut his profits. So we get rid of that, right? And the APMC system, which might actually restrict him from making more money off agriculture. So we remove that. So that is what is happening. It's not a misunderstanding, Chirag. What is happening is a conflict of interest where the government is responding to its constituency, which is the people who finance elections, the big corporations of the country, and the farmers who actually will be the biggest losers of these so-called reforms. It's not a misunderstanding. That is the reason why talks are failing. Because the farmers have minimum set of demands, which are the MSP should not be removed, that the APMC should not be dismantled, and so on. Right? Why should we all worry about it also, even if you are not a farmer? Is because one of the things that is going to happen is that when these laws are passed, the public distribution system, okay, that will be dismantled. Okay, and the public distribution dismantled, more actually dismantled is the wrong word. It will be privatized. It will be not in the hands of the state, but it will be in the hands of the big agro business corporations. Which means that it will not function as a distribution system anymore. Somebody mentioned 35 kg, 3.5 kg of rice or something. All of that will disappear, right? So if you're poor and you don't have the means to buy food, you will not even get it in your ration shop anymore as a right. So these are that is really the issue of the farm laws. So you study it carefully. Don't you should do one thing. Don't read news on WhatsApp and Facebook and Instagram. Okay, read news in newspapers on and on news websites, which are, I'm not saying you should read this newspaper or that newspaper. Read anything, but read as much as possible from different perspectives to get better understanding of things. Hmm? Okay. Anyway, I think enough. We also diverted a little from the subject. Maybe we can do this. Maybe in the next class we can do a reading on the farm laws. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think it's a good idea, no? Like I think we can have discussions on this further. What does the class think?
There is a lot of
Complete
silence, which
silence.
is a little eerie. I mean, these days you have to be careful about what you say. Mm.
Okay.
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
You
Fleur,
got
your neighbor is Naresh Fernandez, no?
Yeah.
Okay. You just tell him to give you all the articles they published on the farm laws.
Okay, yeah.
Mm. Mm. Okay, anyone else? Does it sound good, or do you want to do more academic and theoretical readings?
I mean, I like it, but I think I should also like listen for the group who's actually going to be presenting because yeah.
Because someone had mentioned in the first class that they would like to discuss more about current affairs. You know?
Yes, yes. I remember that too.
Mm.
Was it Tanay? Somebody, no? Tanay, no?
Yeah, where did everybody disappear?
Yeah. Nobody seems to be answering anything.
I have a question. I'd like to like rephrase my old question because what I want to know is the author of the writer, did he believe that poverty, like the elimination of poverty, is it just the poor not suffering from the issues mentioned and not being exploited, or like or a more equal society where like the rich aren't actually exploiting anyone, the poor, the middle class, anyone, like no one's being exploited? What did he mean by elimination of poverty? Is my question.
Well, he didn't talk much about that, and basically the article is more of a provocation as an article, right? So it's the purpose of article is not to kind of lay out a plan for how poverty has to be abolished and things like that. Hmm? So, I mean, you should refer to some of his other works, where especially people's plans and policies. There's a book by Herbert Gans which talks about urban poverty. Very good book. Mainly, I mean, obviously responding to the American context, but it's good where he actually spends more time discussing policies and what can be done and so on, right?
Oh, okay. Thank you.
All right. Okay, Zombieland. Where are all the students? I feel like only 5 of us are doing a class.
Okay.
Shravan, we have too much of you now.
We know you're there. We know you're there present in this class. But we don't know about the others.
Yeah. See, still no response.
Yeah.
Who are the CRs?
Fleur is one. And
No, I'm not a seer.
oh, you're not? Oh, sorry. I thought you were.
No.
Who's the CR then?
Um,
It's Sahil, me, Rati, and Tanvi.
okay.
Oh, okay.
So, okay. Are you all there or
Yeah, we are here. We are here.
Oh, yeah.
started playing Counter Strike on the side?
No, no.
Mm.
Mm.
Okay.
And I think Sahil was the one that had mentioned the current affairs in the first class.
It was Sahil. Okay. I thought
Okay,
it
but we need a vote on this. You want to
yeah,
do
yeah.
more current affairs, or you want to do more theoretical readings?
Do you want us to formally ask the class, like maybe
No,
send
I
out
am asking right now. You can do
Okay.
raise your hands if people are too lazy to unmute and say yes or
Current
no.
affairs. Vaishnavi says current affairs.
A mix of
Testing.
both.
A
Mix
mix of
of
both.
both.
Of course,
Okay.
the mix will happen. Even when we are discussing current affairs, we'll discuss it theoretically, not just. Mm.
I
No,
think
no, but
international
okay.
affairs.
But the question is that what kind of readings you want? I mean, the readings can begin with current affairs, and then we can take up more theoretical themes to discuss them through, or we can do directly theoretical readings and maybe touch upon something that is going on around us. So,
Uh,
kind of
like
reading we want, not the discussion. The discussion will be about both.
Yes, Atharva.
so, like I'm in the next group, so like we would be presenting the next week. So I
Hmm.
think that the way it went today was pretty good. So like we had something to talk about, and then we diverted to various different things. So I think
Okay,
it's
so we'll do it like that. Okay, we'll do it like that. We'll take up a simple reading which has certain concepts which are introduced or discussed, and then we will touch upon some of the other current affairs. ठीक है? ऐसा करेंगे.
yeah.
चलेगा. Okay, sounds good. So your reading list will be updated by the end of today or by tomorrow, and we'll upload the reading on the folder as well, so you can refer to it there. Okay?
Okay. Yeah.
So shall we close now?
Yeah, Hussein,
Yeah.
Govindam here. I'm saying that there are three of students that name isn't there in the list of groups.
Oh, I see. Just send me those names, na? So we'll update the list. Or
Yeah.
you know, add those names.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
in
okay,
the
fine.
list. Just add it. You can edit that document.
Yeah, okay.
Just don't delete the readings. That's all.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and also some of the names, like some of them have left the college. Like even in today's group, I think.
So just replace those names with the
Yeah,
new
with the,
names.
yeah.
Okay, okay.
With the missing names. Sorry. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. All right, guys. So then see you next week. Take care.
Okay.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.